Billionaire's daughter never spoke, until the quiet nanny unlocked her voice. The Vance mansion didn't echo, it devoured sound. Designed by paranoid billionaire Alistair Vance after his wife's tragic death, its walls absorbed whispers, its floors muted footsteps, and its AI systems filtered the world into sterile silence. At its heart lived his daughter, Elara, a ghost in gilded halls who hadn't spoken a word in 8 years. Specialists came and went, labeling her traumatically mute. Alistair built higher walls, deeper silences. Then came the nanny no one heard arrive. Maya Rao spoke less than the grandfather clock Alistair had removed for ticking too loudly. She moved like shadow and moss, her application stating only, "I understand quiet." But Maya carried a secret louder than speech, the belief that silence isn't emptiness, it is a language, and Alistair Vance was screaming in it. This is how a woman who communicated with vibrations unlocked a voice buried under grief, and in doing so, taught a fortress of a man to listen. Let us know where you are watching from, and what time you found this video. 8 years had passed since Alistair Vance, the heiress to the Vance Industries company, had last said a single word. Because of the accident that resulted in the death of her mother, which was a tragedy that her father, the tech giant Alistair Vance, concealed under layers of security, noise-canceling architecture, and artificial intelligence guards. Specialists referred to it as traumatic mutism. Alistair referred to it as a permanent condition, then proceeded to construct a sterile and quiet wing for her inside their neo-futurist home. She talked only when it was absolutely essential, her voice having a deep, earthy tone that vibrated like cello notes. Maya Rao, a former botanist who had transitioned into the role of nanny, brought her own stillness. The reason she was recruited was not because of her qualifications in therapy, rather, it was because she was able to pass Alistair's noise tolerance test. That is, she could work for hours without making a sound. Maya did not make any attempt to get Elara to talk. She, on the other hand, brought the outside home. During the time when Alistair was living in a world of polished chrome and silent LEDs, Maya was sneaking in textures such as rough-hewn wood bowls filled with rain-soaked moss, wind chimes made of seashells, and warm loam for growing orchids. By leading Elara's hands to feel sap rising in a stem, or the shaking of a hummingbird's wings in a feeder, she connected with her via the sense of touch. Over the course of the silent symphony, Maya saw that Elara responded to vibrations. Sometimes, when helicopters circled the estate, she would lay her hand on the glass, and other times, when the geothermal pumps in the house thrummed, she would draw patterns. By striking quartz crystals to produce gentle pulses and strumming the tension wires of Elara's 4-poster bed like a harp, Maya started talking via the use of resonance. Despite the fact that Alistair watched everything via sensors, Maya's tactics were analog and so undetectable to his algorithms. This is known as the billionaire's blind spot. What he saw was nothing but acceptable quiet, and the faint grins of his daughter, which was something he hadn't seen in several years. There was a power outage at the mansion as a major rainstorm was occurring. When Alistair's artificial intelligence system stopped working, Elara's wing fell into complete quiet for the very first time. Elara hid in a closet because she was terrified by the crash of it raining and thundering, which was a genuine, unfiltered sound. It was not through words that Maya was able to locate her, rather, it was via sitting next to her and humming an ancient Bengali lullaby, combining her voice with the rumble of the storm. After some time, Elara's breathing began to synchronize with Maya's chest tremors. After that, she attempted something that had never been done before. She tried to feel the music by pressing her forehead on Maya's chest. Alistair raced inside the greenhouse that Maya had constructed in a solarium that was no longer being utilized the next morning. Orchids dangled from broken computer displays, and earth was spread over the flooring of the antiseptic area. "This madness must come to a stop," he said. You're overstepping." Maya remained mute, but Elara moved in between them to break the silence. Not looking at her father, she stared at a moth that was battling to survive in a spider's web that Maya had left intact. It was a lesson in the harmony that exists in nature. She then spoke in a voice that sounded like rustling parchment, a voice that was not used, yet was shockingly clear. Too loud. Alistair became completely numb. It was him who was too loud. This was the cacophony that she had been trying to avoid, and it was his wrath, his anguish, and his unrelenting dominance. In addition to being a kind of trauma, her silence was also a form of self-preservation against his unresolved grief. There was no reverberation of Elara's voice. It trickled, and it was saved for times when great truth demanded it. She gave the moth the name Luna as soon as Maya let it go. She mumbled the word stuck as she gazed at a koi fish in Alistair's pond, which was subjected to excessive filtration. In the following weeks, she reached out and gently kissed her father's tear-streaked face, which was his first weep in 10 years, and said, "Miss her too." It wasn't only that Maya was a botanist. Prior to the termination of her financing by Vance Industries, she had been doing research in the field of neurology looking into vibrational trauma treatment. In addition to assisting Elara, she accepted the position of nanny in order to demonstrate her hypothesis, which states that unresolved sorrow may express itself as sensory hypersensitivity, and that resonance, rather than words, can reorganize brain circuits. Her quiet was a tool that had been tuned. Maya's study is supported by Alistair, who transforms a section of his mansion into a resonance treatment laboratory that is not for business. Rather than being noisy, Elara is selective in her use of language, and her words carry significant weight. She is taught by Maya how to transform vibrations into creative expression. Elara composes music that is felt rather than heard, and she plays it on instruments that are created of recycled technology pieces from her father's legacy. Although the mansion's corridors continue to shine, they now reverberate with the sound of wind chimes, the reverberation of cello strings, and the odd, priceless whisper that connects two souls who were previously mute but who taught a millionaire to listen. Alistair Vance was unable to move as he remained still in the solarium that was covered with orchids. His daughter's allegation, which was muttered, was heard reverberating in the sudden and deep quiet. It wasn't the volume of his yell that was the problem, rather it was the frequency of his life. It was the perpetual hum of control, the sharp crackle of repressed pain, and the discordant chord of his unresolved guilt that was the problem. When he looked at Elara, he did not see her as a problem that needed to be addressed or as a monument to his failure. Rather, he saw her as a little pale figure whose stillness had served as a screen against the clamor of his shattered world. Maya stayed still, a rock of composure in the middle of the smashed screens and the dirt that had been poured. In the eyes of Alistair, she saw the startled vulnerability that he was experiencing. She watched as his hard stance softened, but he did not dismiss her. It was silent from him. A symbolic pollution of his own antiseptic order, he just turned and went out, leaving muddy footsteps on the floor that was otherwise spotless. This is the revelation of the resonance lab and the koi pond. Alistair was true to his promise and transformed the redundant server farm in the East Wing into Maya's resonance therapy lab. This was accomplished with a brief email sent by his assistant. Sound-absorbing cork and salvaged wood were used in lieu of chrome panels in the installation. The holographic displays were replaced with terrariums that were filled with biophonic life, such as crickets, tree frogs, and the sound of water features gently dripping gently. Located in the middle of the room was a giant table that was covered in sand and concealed with hidden transducers. This table was known as Maya's Earth Harp, and it had the ability to convert sounds like as footfall, heartbeats, and even whispered sentences into visible waves and profound. The harp was Elara's natural attraction. To see the patterns that were developing under her toes, she would stand barefoot on the soft sand below her feet. Maya took a smooth river stone and put it in her hand during one of the afternoons. She whispered, "Feel its weight," and her voice scarcely made a sound that could be heard in the air. "Now, drop it." The rock was dropped. It thuds. Within the sand, a wave that was concentric and surged outward. The eyes of Elara became wider. It was another stone that she picked up. It thuds. As another wave arrives, it was a very faint and practically inaudible sound that came out of her mouth. Impact. In the meanwhile, Alistair started his own period of quiet penance. He gave the order to discontinue the operation of the koi pond's too-complex filtration installation. After becoming hazy, the water became teeming with life on a tiny scale. The stone's jagged edges were subdued by the presence of algae. Elara saw him sitting by the murky water, looking at the water in a listless manner one morning. She knelt down next to him, her reflection shimmering in the same way as his did. They observed for a considerable amount of time as a giant orange koi continuously pushed against a root that was buried in water as it was confined in a shallow eddy. "Stuck," Elara murmured, the word being clear and delicate, mirroring her previous remark. "Stuck," she meant. Alistair jerked up and then slowly shifted his attention to her. The tears began to rise up, and this time they were uncontrollable. It is not true that he removed them. He did little more than nod, the admission weighing heavily on the dense air around him. After that, two groundskeepers gently liberated the koi and led it back to the deeper flowing canal without being requested to do so. The burden that Maya bears and the unspoken deal. It became a silent burden for Maya to keep her secret, which was her previous study and the part that Vance Industries played in defunding it. With great attention, she observed Alistair. She was aware of the cruelty that had been used to build his business. Despite the fact that his financing was real and his obsession with Elara's advancement was evident. At one point in time, when they were discussing the spectrum analysis graphs of Elara's vocalizations, which were only recorded in the secure environment of the laboratory, Alistair talked while maintaining his eyes focused on the screen. "Dr. Rao," he said, referring to her by her position for the very first time. "The first research proposal that you have submitted is titled Vibrational Signatures of Suppressed Trauma in Nonverbal Subjects. At that time, it was determined that it lacked commercial viability." After a brief pause, he made the admission. "A short-sighted, brutal assessment." Maya did not take a breath. This was the edge of the cliff. As he proceeded, his voice became gruff. "Your methods work," he said. "Inside of Elara. So far, it is the only viability that I am concerned about. In the past..." When he looked into her eyes, there was a hint of the steely old look in his eyes, but it was tempered by something new. Humility? "I owe you, Dr. Rao, a debt that I owe you from the past. It is not a weapon. Could you please proceed?" Forgiveness was not the issue. It was an implicit agreement. She would remain silent about the demise of his firm in exchange for his unflinching support. Maya gave a little nod. In the case of Elara, she would agree to it. The harmony of things that are not addressed. It was not a torrent of Elara's voice that reverberated back. At the same time as it emerged like a secret spring, it found its own distinct path. She gave the koi that she had saved the name Sunburst. In the midst of Maya's meticulous pruning of a bonsai, she reached out and gently stroked a fragile branch, muttering, "Hurts?" Maya smiled as she explained that growth may be encouraged by moderate trimming. A flawlessly smooth singing stone from the pond, a dried seed pod that rattled like rain, and a solitary tuning fork with a high pitch were some of the little resonant artifacts that she began placing on Alistair's obsidian desk. Using a little silk cushion as a quiet shrine to his daughter's newly acquired language, he started laying them on the pillow. She was able to express herself most fully via the repurposed technology devices that she and Maya constructed in the laboratory. The titanium tines of an old server rack were plucked to produce deep, shivering tones, and the rack was transformed into a large kalimba. Fiber optic cables that had been discarded were stretched atop a frame made of reused scaffolding to create a laser harp. When the beams of the laser harp were stopped, they triggered ethereal chimes. Elara did not write tunes in the conventional sense. Rather, she chose to create resonant landscapes, which are compositions that are intended to be felt in the bones as much as they are heard. The title of her first composition was Silent Storm, and it included a complex interplay of deep thrumming, representing the thunder that she had formerly dreaded, pattering vibrations, representing rain on glass, and soaring crystalline tones, representing the lullaby that she had heard. The makeover of the home was gradual, but in a significant way. The sound-dampening panels were still in place, but the windows were split open to allow the rustling of leaves and the sounds of birds in the distance to enter. When the wind blew, wind chimes that were made from recycled circuit boards and sea glass made a soft tinkling sound. A tapestry of purposeful and significant music was woven in lieu of the oppressive stillness that had been there. One evening, Alistair discovered Elara working in the laboratory for resonance. She was not composing at the time. She had her knees raised up and was sitting on the earth harp, drawing designs in the sand with her knees. As Maya was repotting a fern, she was close. The old worry of being too loud suddenly paralyzed Alistair as he stood at the doorway, and he paused. Elara raised her gaze. Her silence was unheard. In its place, she rubbed the sand that was next to her, a request for entry. He approached cautiously, taking off his shoes and examining the unusual surface under his feet as he did so. As he sat there, the stillness drawn out, although it was not devoid of sound. There was the sound of their own breathing, the buzz of the terrariums, and the trickle of water that filled the space. At that moment, Elara extended her hand and put her little hand on the sand that was in between them. Subsequently, she started to hum. This is not Maya's lullaby. Rather, it is a straightforward vibration that is low and consistent. Alistair cautiously put his massive hand next to hers on the sand. He was unsure of what to do. Rather of concentrating on listening, he closed his eyes and concentrated on feeling. As the vibration from her hum passed into the sand, it reverberated in his chest and began to move up his arm. It is not a link of words, but rather of frequency that is conveyed. The course of a single tear was followed down his face, and it eventually disappeared into his beard. He did not utter a single syllable. He had no reason to do so. The father and daughter discovered a new bridge in the resonant stillness of the laboratory. This bridge was not constructed on the basis of words, but rather on the deep and healing language of vibration and presence. It was the silent Nanny who observed from the corner, and she had a slight grin on her lips that conveyed her contentment. It wasn't simply Elara's words that opened the door. It was the opening of a heart that had been buried for a very long time in sorrow and steel.